Here's a shocking accusation that could reshape how America fights climate change forever. A powerful U.S. senator claims our biggest global rival is secretly bankrolling lawsuits against American oil companies. But here's where it gets controversial. There's absolutely zero proof to back up this explosive allegation. Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz has dropped a bombshell accusation that China is covertly financing climate change lawsuits across America, allegedly orchestrating a calculated attack on U.S. energy independence. During a heated June congressional hearing, Cruz painted a picture of international conspiracy, claiming Beijing is pulling the strings behind community lawsuits that seek billions in damages from fossil fuel giants. The biggest winner in all of this, China, who's paying the bills, Cruz declared with characteristic confidence. His theory? If these climate cases succeed, American energy production will plummet. Prices will skyrocket, and China will emerge as the undisputed global energy superpower. But here's the part most people miss, and it's absolutely mind-boggling. When pressed for evidence to support this serious international allegation, Cruz's office provided something that would make any investigative journalist's jaw drop. A response generated by ChatGPT. Yes, you read that correctly. The artificial intelligence chatbot essentially admitted there's no direct, documented grant-to-lawsuit pipeline connecting Chinese funding to American climate litigation. To understand why this matters, let's break down what these climate lawsuits actually are. Picture this. Communities across America, from coastal California towns threatened by rising seas to Texas cities battered by extreme weather, are taking major oil and gas corporations to court. These aren't abstract environmental protests. They're legal battles, seeking real money to help communities adapt to climate change impacts that scientists say are already here. These lawsuits operate on a simple principle that most Americans can relate to. If you knowingly cause damage, you should help pay for the cleanup. The communities argue that fossil fuel companies spent decades misleading the public about climate risks, while their own internal scientists understood the dangers perfectly well. Think of it like tobacco litigation, but instead of lung cancer, we're talking about devastating hurricanes, deadly heat waves, and catastrophic flooding. For years, Republican lawmakers have been digging into the funding sources behind America's environmental movement, treating it like a detective story with hidden villains. This summer, their focus intensified dramatically when a coalition of GOP state attorneys general demanded federal legislation to create what they call a liability shield for energy companies, essentially legal armor against climate lawsuits. The centerpiece of Cruz's conspiracy theory revolves around an organization called Energy Foundation China. Based in San Francisco with a Beijing office, this nonprofit is led by a former Chinese climate official. Cruz characterized it as one of the primary vehicles for what he described as an unholy alliance between leftist billionaires, radical environmental organizations, and the Chinese Communist Party. Here's where the story takes an interesting turn. Energy Foundation China has indeed provided funding to prominent environmental groups like the Natural Resources Defense Council, Rocky Mountain Institute, and World Resources Institute. But, and this is crucial, every single one of these organizations vehemently denies using any Chinese money for U.S. litigation. Adam Bateman from Rocky Mountain Institute stated unequivocally that his organization doesn't even participate in lawsuits, and all Chinese funding goes toward the energy transition inside of China. The World Resources Institute echoed this position, explaining their China work focuses on air quality, sustainable cities, and energy efficiency. Not American courtroom battles. Michael Wall from the Natural Resources Defense Council was equally adamant, insisting his organization uses Energy Foundation China funding exclusively for programs to reduce climate pollution within China itself. For their U.S. legal work, NRDC relies on entirely separate funding streams. And this is the part most people miss about international relations. China's motivations might be completely different from what Cruz suggests. John Cheng-En Liu, a sociology professor at National Taiwan University who studies Chinese climate propaganda, offers a fascinating counterpoint. He argues that framing climate litigation as Chinese-funded is an easy tactic to generate opposition. But China might actually prefer America to stay focused on fossil fuels rather than competing in renewable energy markets. China wants to be the leader in the key technology in the future, Liu explains. If we are following this train of thought, then they will prefer the U.S. not taking climate very seriously and let China take over all the EVs, take over solar and wind. This perspective flips the entire narrative on its head. Instead of China trying to cripple American energy, they might be perfectly content watching America cling to yesterday's technology while Beijing dominates tomorrow's clean energy economy. Meanwhile, the legal battles continue with mixed results. Some judges have dismissed climate cases, ruling that carbon pollution is a federal government responsibility. But other lawsuits are advancing toward trial, creating genuine financial anxiety for fossil fuel companies. The Supreme Court recently declined to block several high-profile cases, including one filed by Honolulu that could set precedent nationwide. The stakes couldn't be higher. In a recent legal brief, the Justice Department warned that allowing these climate cases to proceed could expose energy companies to billions in damages and create a confusing patchwork of local regulations across different states. Opponents of the lawsuits have coined a provocative term for their adversaries, the Green Mafia. A congressional memo from Republican staffers detailed how tax-exempt nonprofits fund law firms like Cher Edling, which has filed numerous climate cases. Since these organizations enjoy tax-exempt status, the memo argues that taxpayers are effectively subsidizing legal attacks on American energy companies. But environmental advocates push back hard against this characterization. There's simply no comparison between the resources the oil industry has and the resources that nonprofits have, argues NRDC's Michael Wall. Litigation is a way for people to participate in the governmental process by working to ensure that the laws that protect them are enforced and carried out. Richard Wiles from the Center for Climate Integrity sees Cruz's China allegations as pure political theater, designed to create political cover for Congress to grant fossil fuel companies legal immunity from climate litigation. He frames the community lawsuits in simple terms. All these communities are asking is that the oil industry pay their fair share of the damages that they knowingly cause. It's completely reasonable. The American Petroleum Institute, representing oil and gas companies, calls the climate lawsuits baseless and part of a coordinated campaign against energy companies. Climate policy belongs in Congress, their general counsel Ryan Myers argues, not a patchwork of courtrooms. But here's the controversial question that nobody wants to address directly. Even if Chinese funding isn't behind these lawsuits, should it matter who pays for legal cases if the underlying claims are valid? If fossil fuel companies truly did mislead the public about climate risks for decades, does the source of litigation funding change the fundamental justice of holding them accountable? This brings us to an even more provocative consideration. Cruz's allegations might actually reveal more about American political dysfunction than Chinese interference. When a U.S. senator responds to requests for evidence with ChatGPT printouts, what does that say about the quality of our political discourse? As climate impacts intensify across America, from record-breaking heat waves to unprecedented flooding, communities are demanding accountability through the courts. Whether funded by Chinese conspiracies, environmental philanthropists, or concerned citizens, these lawsuits represent a fundamental question about corporate responsibility in the age of climate change. The real controversy isn't who's funding these cases. It's whether American communities have the right to seek compensation for climate damages from the companies that allegedly caused them. And that's a debate that goes far beyond international politics, into the heart of corporate accountability, environmental justice, and democratic governance. So here's the question that should keep us all up at night. Are we so distracted by conspiracy theories about foreign funding that we're missing the real issue? Whether fossil fuel companies should be held accountable for their role in climate change. And if Cruz's China allegations are baseless, what does that tell us about how political leaders manufacture distractions when facing inconvenient truths? What's your take? Do you think communities should have the right to sue fossil fuel companies for climate damages, regardless of who funds the lawsuits? Or do funding sources matter more than the underlying legal claims? Share your thoughts. This debate is far from over. And your voice matters in shaping how America responds to the climate crisis.